jump right in today. I'll post this demo on our YouTube channel, and feel free to share it out to anyone you think is interested. A link to our YouTube channel is in our demo, as well as link to our forum, should you have any questions that come up today. All right, so starting us out with visuals, Michael's going to talk about chart theme color variants and color updates. Okay, Michael's going to reconnect really quick. He was having some trouble with audio. Gina, we'll move on to donut charts with thresholds.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And... all right. So recently we've been, and Michael was going to kind of introduce this at first by explaining all the charts and that stuff that he was going to talk about, but we've been like paying more attention to the chart designs in PatternFly 4, and there's been a request for donut charts with thresholds. This design has been marked up because I had to document it, but you can see that it's like an incremental view of how the donut would start as an empty state with thresholds. So this is a static donut chart, and each of these gray tints or shades, they represent the thresholds. So the blue here is the actual data set donut, and once it hits that threshold, it'll turn to this yellow, and then once it hits the danger threshold, it will turn to that red. Those match, or they match with the alert styles that we have too, so the colors are consistent there. This was the thought for the hover. Currently in our donut charts, there's an availability to hover over a segment, and then it displays a tooltip. So that's what the thought was here, but it would expand the actual data set so that their focus is on that. And then the tooltip most likely would be able to be customized, but I thought that it could just show the threshold name, so in this case it would be danger, and then show the amount of space remaining. So it gives an indication of what threshold it's at without even being able to see the name next to it, I guess. And then on the bottom here, this is just our normal percentage donut chart. So if a user wanted to have a donut chart that didn't have thresholds, they would get this basic gray donut, and then the data set would fill recommended. We would recommend this blue color, but they would have the opportunity to use whatever color that they want there. That's all I have. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Great, thanks so much, Gina. And Michael, is there anything else that you wanted to add to charts as well?
Yes, and looks like my
Great.
mic is working now.
It is, yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Okay. Wait, is that the wrong screen? It's like is it sharing the presentation or the navigator?
It's sharing like the presentation mode, so we see two slides.
Okay, I'll just go through it like this. This. Still getting used to this setup. There we go. Okay, is that better? Cool. So yeah, so this story I had to deliver some sort of specs for the chart theme color variants, and just to remind you guys, our Victory charting library, the way that it handles colors is by providing these themes, which are essentially these lists of colors, which, depending on which chart it is and which parts of the theme you're defining, it'll kind of go through, and color A will be value A, or value 1, and value 2 will be color B, value 3 will be color C, so on. Um, so we wanted to, of course, have themes that we could provide by default. These are in addition to the multi-color color order, the high contrast color order that we came up with, which you guys might remember from a previous demo. In case you don't want to use every color like that, you might want a theme. And we kind of focused on monochromatic themes. But the first thing I wanted to uh, kind of focus on, or I guess talk about, we're looking at the blue theme here, and really I'm just showing this for context because the first thing I want to talk about is what I've been calling the universals of the theme. And these are colors that appear in every chart no matter what the theme is. So they don't change depending on if you're using a blue theme or a green theme. So if I go back and forth here, you can kind of get the gist of what they are. They're basically everything but the values, with the exception of the bullet charts over there. So bullet charts are really interesting because they're on the right side there. They're kind of intended use as comparing different measures of data. So you've got a primary measure, which is your color bar, and then you've got your sort of comparative measures, which are those ones in the back, which are the gray ones. So that's similar to how they work in PatternFly 3, but we're using our grays there as well, and those will never change depending on the color. And the reason for that is you can imagine, using anything other than those grays, how difficult it would be to kind of get a color that works with that blue or whatever color you're using over top of it to provide enough contrast and visibility for all of the ranges. So yeah, we're pretty much sticking with our grayscale values there, our ED and D1. And then another use for that is sort of like what Gina just showed with the donut charts. So we've got a couple grayscale values in there for our thresholds. So I want to show the blue first because the blue, we recently switched to this new blue 06C, and it's a really nice blue. And it required me to rework the other blues of this color scheme. So this color family is what we're calling them. So every color's got 5 colors of the color family. There's the base color and then 2 that are lighter and 2 that are darker. And so I had to remake these, and I thought it looked really good based on the new color and the way that I approached remaking it, which was similar to the old ones, but it was a little different, which I'll talk about in a second. So then I moved on to green, and I realized, kind of going back and forth between these, that the green, I hadn't changed the green, and it felt really flat. It just, despite using our high contrast color order system where we jump between 300 to 100 to 500 and all that, it still didn't feel like there was a lot of contrast, especially if you look at that donut chart, for example. You can tell that there's a big difference between the blue and the green here, and the green just feels a lot more muted and flat. So I realized I had to do the same thing for the green. So I went ahead and did that, and you can kind of see the difference here. I just kind of made it a little bit more saturated because that's kind of what happened with the blue, was our core blue, that middle value there, got a little more saturated. And then I also went a little darker on the dark end to provide more contrast. You can see there's a lot less contrast in that one above. And what that does is, as you can see, really helps sort of bring it, I guess, kind of to life a little bit. It's kind of cheesy, but it's just a lot more contrast, and it's a lot easier to see the values, especially if you check out that donut chart and the bar chart down there. Whoops. So yeah, it's overall a really nice improvement. I think it helps. I probably wouldn't use this green theme, but with this new one, I probably would. I think it's a lot nicer, and it's a lot more readable, and it just looks nicer. So then there was the purple, and I was like, man, this was not what I realized. I didn't realize the purple was like this. It's almost like a periwinkle. After I started looking at these other colors, it's so bright, and it's very I don't know. It's not really. It feels less purple than I thought it was. So I did the same thing for the purple, except I did an extra thing where I sort of added a little bit more blue into the color to sort of bring it more towards like an indigo. And that really helped, I think, bring it into, again, if you really notice the change between that bar chart or that donut, but it's just a much nicer color overall. It doesn't feel as like dainty, I guess, and it's got a much better range of values now. We've got that nice deeper purple, and it's still very purple. Even though I added some blue in there into the colors, it's not, it's unmistakably purple, which I think is sort of what we wanted. So the cyan just makes me like sad to look at. We were gonna get rid of this color, I think, and with good reason. Um, it's just like a rainy day in like an empty parking lot or something. It's just sad to look at. So I wanted to give it another chance, and this one I think is a really big improvement. We've got a much nicer, brighter color now. It's sort of like what the old colors would have been in their prime, like 30 years ago. And then, of course, it did make a really big improvement in just how the whole thing, when you look at this whole page, how it feels. It just feels a lot more fresh, and you can actually tell the difference between the values. It doesn't like feel sad. So um, that was pretty much it. The scope of the story initially, you can see some before and afters here of those palettes I just showed. Initially was to just define these themes, but it sort of turned into this reconfiguration of the colors, which I think had a really big improvement and was probably a lot more interesting to look at than a bunch of hex values on a Google Doc. So yeah, that's it.
Hey, Michael, I just have a question for you.
Sure.
So what is the thought about usage of these color themes? I think, for most everything we do, probably the blue theme would be our default that we use. But do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts about when people might use a different theme?
Not really. I totally agree with you. I think the blue theme is going to be what most of our products use. I think it was really just an effort to have a little bit more variation out of the box, without, being too inconsistent in the look and feel of the charts. So, yeah, I think it really just came down to wanting to offer a little bit more variety, before people start doing their own thing, because that can get really messy once people start doing custom themes. So, um, enough variation. I guess the goal is enough variation with ensured consistency. So it's not just a crazy custom thing. But yeah, I think the blue is going to be the one you see 95% of the time. So,
Thanks.
yeah, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Michael. All right, and moving on to CSS, we have Michael Cooker, who's going to share a variety of enhancements.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Must have done something wrong. Let's see. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so first up is this is more of a documentation change in core. It affected React more so, but for anyone using core and the about modal component, in the content area of the about modal, we used to make it a requirement that you use the content component that formatted paragraphs and lists and things like that for you. That's no longer a requirement, and so you can use other things other than the content component in case you wanted to put alerts or tables or something inside of here and you didn't want them to format as they would in the content component. You can place them outside of the content component now. Next up was a variety of changes with regards to the paddings around elements and components inside of mostly the page component, but also components that you might place inside of the page component. So this is just a good example. If you look at any of our page demos, the left and right spacing on the sides of the page and on the sides of like navigation, the sides of this main section here, the sides of a table or a data list inside of the main section, that left and right spacing decreased, as well as the top and bottom spacing in content areas inside of the page component. The top and bottom spacing between the top of this table and the section above it, spaces like that. Up next is we made some font size changes and margin changes to the headings, in most notably in the content component. So you have H1s, H2s, H3s. We bumped all of the heading elements down one of our font sizes inside of the global variable system. And then we also reduced the margin that appears underneath it. That also implied a change inside of the title content, or I'm sorry, the title component, where we make recommendations for what type of margin to use along with the title component. We also updated the recommendation for the margin, margin top and margin bottom. Or I'm sorry, actually just the margin bottom for that. And up next is, this is a pretty cool feature in our table. We have something that I think was called a drop column support, but it basically is just the concept that you can hide and show cells inside of a table at a given breakpoint. And so it gives you the ability to say, hide this rightmost column on a medium breakpoint for some reason. And then you can see it here where the table has broken to a grid layout, and we start hiding and showing columns inside of the table. And so you can do this with any of our table components. You just use responsive modifier classes to apply to the columns that you want to hide or show at a given breakpoint. And up next was in our wizard component, we had the need for a more narrow width of the navigation. So the navigation was a little bit wider than this by default. We just added an option for a modifier that allows you to have more narrow navigation if that suits your use case better. Up next is a new variation of our button component. It's an inline variation, and you use this in combination with the link variation of the button. And so our traditional link button, as you can see, the focus ring, it's the size of a traditional button. The inline link button displays just like an inline link would inside of content, except inside of your content, except you can use this with a button element in your HTML. And that's it.
Great, thanks so much, Michael. Any questions? All right, and Christy's going to share some CSS updates and some website updates.
Hey everyone. So I think last time I presented, I showed this card demo that I was working on. And so basically they all use the card component, and then the image and these actions here weren't actually baked into the component. So I added like flex modifiers and some alignment modifiers. And then someone asked me like, are they baked into the component? And so I surveyed some of the products that UXD is working on, and actually a lot of cards like either have like actions in the right corner or like an image here or a big image. So then I was working on actually having these in the component. So if you can see here, this has like a card header, body, and a footer, and then this is a new element, a card head. So basically you could like change the background color of it, you could put a background image in it, and then you could have an image here, and basically anything in your actions, you can put anything in your actions element to the right and it'll always float to the right. And then anything else in your card can either float like left and align with your actions here, or you could also have the body just remain here and then just actions in the top. And this is an example of the body floating to the left next to the actions. So yeah, so that's some nice additions to our card component. And then for the website, I worked on the spaces page. Basically, it goes over all of PatternFly spaces and then how to use them in the context of content with like line heights and stuff. And then I also worked on the icons page, so like restyling the search and also restyling these icons and the popover, and then Joachim tweaked the React code to make it inline. And then we had a lot of feedback in our bug bash just about tables in general. And so we're using markdown tables, which means there's not much you can do with styling them, but basically just working on making these more responsive so they don't bleed off the page. So yeah, and that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Christy. Any questions?
So, Christy, so the card view stuff looks great. So what's the status of that? Is that merged now?
Yeah, that just got merged, and then I'm gonna update the demo this morning, and then that should be merged too.
Okay, excellent.
Great, thanks, Christy. And Jakob's going to share some updates to the website as well.
Oh, there's my mic. Okay. All right. So let's see. First one for the inline icons page popovers. So I got help from Sarah Kambacher. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to say the last name, but Sarah helped me out to figure out the CSS to get the to get these icons here to be inline. So if you go to our website, icons, and Chrissy just showed off the CSS that she did for this part. But yeah, when you click on one of these now, you basically get the popover inline, and that's using some cool grid magic that I didn't know about, but Sarah helped me out with that. So now you can click on any of these and get these inline popovers. That's the first one. Next, we've got, the code preview samples now look the same across React and Core. So if I look at, for example, the React alert example, and I open up this code toggle, you can see that you've got the same styling and look and feel that you get when you switch over to the HTML version. So over here, the code toggle is identical. And then lastly, the PS3 content for the website was moved over into a V3 subfolder while still preserving bookmarks to previous URLs. And this is still in a pull request. This hasn't been merged in yet, so I think we want to make some build changes first, probably before that can go in. But yeah, let me just see if this starts up. So yeah, you can see that if you go onto the page, you're not automatically redirected to /v3. And if I browse around PatternFly 3, you can see that it's all under the v3 subdirectory. Actually, if somebody had this page booked without the v3, it would redirect it. So there's a script that basically takes all of the HTML pages and creates corresponding redirect pages for it that I added. And of course, you can always switch back to PatternFly 4. So now you can toggle between v3 and v4 in that way. And that also allows us in the future to add some kind of switcher if we wanted to. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jakob. Moving on to React, Don is going to share TypeScript integration testing.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, so this sprint, we spent some time going back and looking at our React integration demo app. We had put this together to start testing TypeScript and have something to run against, but we wanted to refactor it to make it easier for people to add integration tests and update the demos apps more quickly. So we added more structure to it. The demos now can all be found in the demo app TS. If you go in here in source, under demos is where we write demos that'll actually show up in the demo application we have. And to start that, you do yarn start demo app after you've done a build. And this will bring up the demo app. And our tests are actually, under Cypress. I'll show that in a second. But over here is like all the different demos you can navigate to, tab demo, tool demo. And if you want to run a test against it, we're using this tool called Cypress. And that runs integration tests for us. So if you go over to the main application, just when you're developing, you want to actually do yarn start Cypress, which will bring up the Cypress application. And I'll bring up all the tests that we have. So right now we have 3. If you want to run one, you click on it, the first time it's going to take a few seconds to transpile this because it's written in TypeScript. And then after that, it'll go through and run the test. And we also updated our README on the in the integration folder to actually tell people how to do this. So if you get stuck, you can look there. And as you saw, I went through it, it navigated through the site, went through, did a bunch of clicks, made sure some of the tab items were what they were expected. To get the items of what to select, they use CSS selectors. So you can either look at this, because this is like you would when you're doing normal debugging in Chrome, because this is just running in Chrome. Or they even have this tool over here that can help. So if you click on this, it actually gives you the code that you need to navigate there, and this is the actual command that you would run in your application. So when you're writing the test, you do a CI get, and you go to whatever you want to select with the CSS selector. So that's kind of helpful. I'll show you real quick where we have updated our documentation. And in here, any of the questions you have for like Cypress and how to write tests and what the APIs are, you can just click here, and it has all of the APIs to tell you what to do. They also have a good site right here with examples that show different types of tests you might want to perform. So they have single sign-on, things for web forms, a bunch of other ones like tabs and handling links. So that's pretty helpful when you're trying to figure out how to write some of these tests. And that's pretty much it. Is there any questions?
Great, thank you, Don.
Yep.
And Katie's going to share Typeahead Select, single and multi.
Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I'm actually on the new V4 site for this too. Our Surge is a little wonky with the popover menus. So I worked on the Typeahead select inputs, the past sprint, both single and for multiple. So you can see it looks a little bit like the single select, but instead of having just a placeholder text, you can actually start typing. So you can filter. Every keystroke will give you a filter, and then you can select them. And this one behaves a lot like the single select, aside from the Typeahead. Can't say words this morning. You can see there's a clear selection button here, so you can actually reset the state of the filter. And there is also, if you type in input that doesn't match anything, there's a empty state that shows up as well. For multiple Typeahead select, it's going to be very similar. The only major difference is if you select something, the menu doesn't automatically close, and it adds a chip to the input. Every one you select will get selected and add more chips. And if you remove a chip from these little delete buttons, it actually also removes the selection. And the clear selection will remove everything. And I think that about covers it. The major difference between these selects and the other selects right now is that keyboard navigation is not finished for the Typeaheads. That's what I'm currently working on, but there's not a PR up for it yet. And that's it.
Great, thanks so much, Katie. Any questions? All right, and finally, Zach's going to share TypeScript props in our docs.
See my screen?
Yes, we can.
The wonderful PR. Okay. Yep, this PR resolved an issue for showing the TypeScript props in our docs. So for our TypeScript components, we weren't always getting the required and default, and it had always been kind of hacky the way that we were applying these properties, and now it's less hacky and it works better using a beta version of React Doctrine, which handles TypeScript. So what that means for people writing in TypeScript is to get this little this little TypeScript badge thing. All you have to do is add TypeScript true to your markdown, and that's just useful to be able to go through them real fast and see that all the properties are working, or to keep track of which ones are getting converted. And to get the properties to display, the only tricky thing is for functional components, you have to, in the destructuring here that you do in the constructor, you have to define this type right here. Otherwise, the docgen won't be able to know the types that you're passing to your functional component. And that's it. We got back our functionality. Hooray.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach.
Quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
Are we also filtering out, like if we extend HTML attributes, are we filtering out that noise, or are we adding it somewhere separately, or is it just being added like normal props?
So we're just filtering out the noise for now. So it just grabs the ones that are not extended.
Ah, got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Any questions? Okay. Thanks everyone so much for joining today. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time at our next PatternFly demo. Bye, everybody.